Okay, what does the perfect ticket mean to me? Alright, I just finished a little breakfast, so I'm chewing it up still. But this thought came into my head. What's the perfect way to write a ticket? It's communicating an understanding of the law written exactly as intended by the lawmakers, communicated to the person who's receiving the ticket perfectly so they understand exactly why they're getting that ticket, okay? And for me, the best way to communicate that is to show me the exact wording of that law, all right? And then we can both interpret it. No, instead the cops prefer to use vague generalities, a vague description of what the law might be, stretching the truth. That's why they don't want you to know the exact wording, because they want to stretch it for their own narratives, and then write you the ticket and then let you settle it in court, okay? Maybe that's how the system's supposed to be. Maybe that's the best way. Just the cops do their darndest to interpret the law, but they make mistakes. They just write the tickets and then let everything be settled in court. But instead, it's like the cops are serving these tickets to serve their narrative if they don't like the person especially. And then the judges basing their decision on the credibility of who's more credible. And even though the cops may not be all that credible, they're legally allowed to lie and all that. And I have history, a recorded, documented history of cops lying about various things, their names, their reports that don't coincide with the video and all that. But the lawyer, if it comes down between you and the cop's going to have more credibility simply because the judge is going to decide over the cop over you. Simply because they don't know you and they know the cop. They know the evil. It's the lesser of the two evils, being aware of the evil, what people also describe as a good old boy network. But interpreting to the law is really important. That's why I suggest lawmakers be out there enforcing, because they're the ones who are more hands-on. It's like they built the house, okay? They know all about all the intricacies of the house. They're the contractors, all right? They know the insulation and the electrical wiring and all that. No, instead they send out some illegals or something with a vague general idea of how things are done. They just take the orders. Oh, put a nail here, saw so many inches off this board. They're just doing, these tasks. Go sweep this excess rubbish off to the side or whatever. They're just doing what they're told. That's what cops constantly say. And that's what you see in that controversy about the cop who's spent the prisoner's food money in Georgia or whatever. He just said, "I'm just following orders. I don't write them. If you want things to change, then run for government positions." Okay, this is how the system is. Well, cops writing tickets. I mean, I don't know is that written? Is that a law on how cops are supposed to write tickets? Okay, aren't they supposed to make you aware, like fully aware, like be articulable? They're supposed to be like, for detainment, you're supposed to have articulable suspicion that you're about to commit a crime, which obviously, that's the one they can use. You have committed a crime, you're in the process of committing a crime, you're about to commit a crime, everybody's about to commit a crime. So we could just detain everybody at any time. But they have to be articulable about that, especially when writing a ticket, okay? Like, for example, I was given a ticket because I didn't say I was under an emergency. It's so stupid. Where does it say that? I have to communicate that I'm in an emergency, all right, and it said something about vaguely emergency whatever in my ordinance, but it didn't say I had to communicate that I was under an emergency, okay? All right, you have to it's very vague. You know, the cops are trying to assign specifics to a vague law. Okay, and then of course the judges are just going to base their decision on credibility. So it's ridiculous. It's like, why even show up at court? Why even go to court? Just, you know, I don't even know how you handle that stuff. It's like the cops really are the judges out there in a lot of ways, and they don't want to discuss law with you. They don't want to sit down and discuss, because a lot of times they get it wrong. I had that situation in Horseshoe Bend, which is searchable. I probably type in Horseshoe Bend Travis Hines, you know, for the topics. You know, any words. You could type in any words and type my name and come up with something. I'm sure I put out too much. The cops argued to keep my tow truck money, for the cops to keep my $330. I had to respond to 2 weeks to my tow truck hearing. It's 2 weeks in Horseshoe Bend, but I found out this city is 5 days. But in Horseshoe Bend it's 2 weeks, and I responded in time. It's all an internal thing with just me and the cops. But they came back that Sergeant DeRoe, who is still employed, which, you know, he's just as bad as McIntosh, really. He argued that it's perfectly legal for a cop to demand your ID at any time. That's it. He stood by that. And then my public defender made a better argument that you can't just demand ID from people for your own curiosities. Okay, it has to serve the greater good of the public. All right, and cops misinterpret that. All right, and they'll do that constantly. Okay, they have vague interpretations of the law, and they'll stretch the law to serve their narratives. You know, like, you're standing next to a building. Oh, and it's not even stretching the law. It's stretching actual accounts of what's been happening in the past, the historical issues with certain places and stuff. Like, I was standing next to a library, and I was told it's been broken into several times. Well, I did a public records request, and there were alarms that went off, but it's during the daytime, and I was standing in front at night. It really looked like a real stretch of the truth, stretching the law, and, you know, just that. So, for not being clear about what the ticket is really shady. I always ask for I want exact reference, you know, and I don't have Wi-Fi. I could search it myself, but I can't afford having a phone or Wi-Fi, so, you know, I'm relying on the cop to interpret it, and they want to give me vague generalities of what the law is. You know, sometimes they'll ask me if I know what the law is. Well, I really don't. I have to see, but they don't want to talk about the law. They're not there to discuss the law. You know, it's so silly. It's supposed to be law enforcement, but they don't want to discuss the details of the law, and that's a real disconnect with the public.